Former Deputy Associate Attorney General John Wood and Jamil Jaffer, former Justice Department National Security Attorney. John, let me start with you. I think the biggest news here perhaps could be Rosenstein last week, apparently according to this Bloomberg report, on Thursday, reassuring President Trump that he is not the target of the Mueller probe. This seems to be amazing in the sense that this probe is going on for a very long period of time. I know things can change, but it feels like there's some consequences to this.
I think it's somewhat significant. Obviously, it's better to not be a target than to be a target. And so in that sense, it's very good news for the president. But he shouldn't take too much comfort in it. As you pointed out, Charles, things can change. And also, I haven't seen any reports on whether or not the president is what's called a subject of the investigation. So there are really three categories in which people can fall. Either a target, which means that there's substantial evidence that you've committed a crime. A subject, which is sort of the intermediate level, and that's when your conduct falls within the scope of the investigation, or a witness, which is what the name suggests. So what we don't know is whether or not the president is a subject of the investigation, and that's a pretty big question because subjects can often turn into targets.
Jamil, what do you make of it, though? Again, and of course, the timing of it, too, is it seems pretty interesting because last week, the big scuttlebutt was that President Trump was prepared to actually fire Rosenstein.
Yeah, look, Charles, I mean, it's a hard situation. Obviously, the president has his agenda he wants to focus on. And these stories are distracting him, I think, from making it hard for him to do his job as president. At the same time, it's helpful to know that he's not the target of this investigation. But I think John is right to mention that, the president could still be the subject. And he may even be a witness. And we obviously know that Cohen is being investigated for his business dealings out of the Southern District of New York. That's separate and distinct from the Mueller investigation, which is taking place in D.C.
Jamil, what about now this potentially McCabe facing criminal prosecution? What do you make of it? And what would the impact be for the Trump administration, keeping in mind that I think the American public, certainly the stock market at this point, yearning desperately for all-around closure?
Yeah, well, obviously it extends things, extends the conversation about these topics. We'll see if Rudy Giuliani is successful in closing down the Mueller investigation. I think it's likely to go on for a while, though, to be honest with you. On the McCabe front, you can't talk to federal prosecutors or federal investigators and not tell them the whole story or mislead them. And so the Inspector General, an independent Inspector General, now recommending potential charges. We'll see if the Justice Department actually files charges. But if they do, that's obviously problematic for Andrew McCabe. And it does sort of play into the Trump administration's concerns about McCabe and ultimately his firing.
John, we had this breaking news coming into the show. Jamil just referenced it. Rudy Giuliani joining President Trump's personal legal team. The focus here is wrapping up the Mueller investigation. How big of a role and how much of an impact should this be, considering, of course, we know Rudy Giuliani's credentials, what he was able to achieve from a legal point of view as a prosecutor in New York?
Yeah, it's potentially significant. We don't know yet. I do not think that Rudy Giuliani is going to be able to come in and simply negotiate a resolution to matters with Mueller. So it's not going to go away very quickly. But I think it could be a significant development if Giuliani is able to come in and provide stability and leadership to the legal team. There's been a fair amount of turnover in the legal team, and that can be very disruptive. And so they really need somebody who can come in and who has the president's ear and who the president will take seriously. I mean, one of the things that we hear is that the president is reluctant to take legal advice. I think he really needs to listen to what Rudy Giuliani and others will tell him and listen to the lawyers. And hopefully Giuliani will have the credibility and the gravitas to be able to give the tough advice to the president. John,
why do you continue to suggest this Mueller probe has a long way to go? I mean, I think you and Jamil both agree that it has a long way to go. For those who are not familiar with how this legal system works, it feels like it's dragged on for a long period of time already. It feels like it's branched off into areas that have abandoned the original writ or original, at least the announced, of aim or of the probe in the first place. And it feels to me like a rudderless ship. So why should it continue to go on for such a long period of time?
Well, it has gone on for a long time, but these kinds of investigations, whether they're special counsel investigations or independent counsel investigations under the previous law, tend to go on for years. That doesn't necessarily mean that they're focused on the president, but as you've pointed out, they've found a lot of different things that sort of branch off from the original investigation where they've brought charges. And so because of that, since some of these cases, are actually potentially going to go to trial, such as, we're still waiting to see what happens with Manafort, it's probably not going to go away anytime soon.
I do want to share with you, you guys, and also our audience, a response from the McCabe team. Quote, "We were advised of the referral within the past few weeks. Although we believe the referral is unjustified, the standard for an IG referral is very low. We have already met with staff members from the U.S. Attorney's Office. We are confident that unless there is inappropriate pressure from high levels of the administration, the U.S. Attorney's Office will conclude that it should decline to prosecute." Jamil, reading between the lines, is saying if President Trump doesn't pressure Jeff Sessions, this thing will go away. What's your interpretation?
Yeah, I mean, I think they're saying it directly. But this is an interesting move by the McCabe team. They're essentially sort of suggesting that that there's no problem here. But of course, if it's true that he lied to federal investigators or misled them, that's enough for a charge. It doesn't matter with any pressure. So they're trying to suggest that it would take inappropriate pressure. But the reality is, federal prosecutors all the time charge 1001 violations, 18 U.S.C. 1001, which is lying to a federal investigator or lying to a federal official. And so it would not be unusual. So I don't think it's fair for them to say that it would only be because of pressure. That being said, it's unclear why these charges necessarily be brought, but we'll see what happens going forward.
Well, I mean, if it's Martha Stewart, I guess, is a great example, right? Someone who went to prison not for what she was accused of, but for lying during the interview process. If it's good enough for her to go to prison, why would McCabe not have to face the same sort of circumstances, Jamil?
Well, look, that's exactly right. I mean, I think that's true here. The same as with Mike Flynn, right? Mike Flynn pled to lying to the FBI, and so I don't think it would take inappropriate pressure for them to bring the charges now that they've gotten a referral. But there's a lot of prosecutorial discretion, as John will tell you, in the U.S. Attorney's Office, and they have to make a decision. This is an interesting play by the McCabe team to sort of put it back on this inappropriate pressure question. I don't think that's really a fair move.
Certainly the politicalization of everything, John, at this point we're accustomed to, so I guess this would be no different, right?
Yeah, but here, keep in mind, this is stemming from an Inspector General investigation, and the Inspector General here, Michael Horowitz, is a very reputable former prosecutor, very talented lawyer, served in both Republican and Democratic administrations, and so I think that gives the U.S. Attorney's Office some cover if they do end up bringing charges to be able to say this is not a political thing, this is based upon a referral from the Inspector General.
Wasn't he appointed by President Obama?
I believe that he was, and he previously served under the Clinton administration in the criminal division.
All right, gentlemen, thank you both for your expertise. Really